I did something that most poker coaches would tell you is a terrible idea. Something that goes against conventional wisdom about how to actually make money at the poker tables. I committed to playing 10,000 consecutive hands using only GTO strategy, pure solver-approved plays. No exploitative adjustments, no reads, no population tendencies, no deviating from equilibrium for any reason whatsoever. Just cold mathematical perfection applied hand after hand for weeks, until I had a sample large enough to actually mean something statistically, and what I discovered completely changed how I think about poker strategy and how I teach it to other players. But before I share the results, let me be clear about what this experiment actually involved. I did not just memorize some pre-flop charts and call it GTO. That is what most players do, and it is not even close to real game theory optimal play. I studied solver outputs obsessively for months before starting. I drilled spots until the frequencies were automatic. I used randomizers to hit my exact bluffing and value betting percentages on every street. I tracked every single decision against solver-approved lines to ensure I was executing as close to theoretical perfection as a human being can actually achieve at the tables without a computer making decisions for them. This was not casual. This was surgical. 10,000 hands of pure game theory optimal poker played with discipline that bordered on obsessive. And the results? They were not what I expected. They were not what most players would expect. And they revealed something about poker strategy that the entire GTO versus exploitative debate completely misses. Something that could fundamentally change how you approach your own development as a player if you truly understand what the data actually shows about how money is made and lost at the poker table. Let me give you the headline number first. Then I will break down exactly what it means and why it matters for your game specifically right now. After 10,000 hands of pure GTO poker, my win rate was positive. I was winning money. That is the good news. But here is where it gets interesting. Here is where everything changes. My win rate was significantly lower than my historical average playing exploitative poker against the same player pool at the same stakes over similar sample sizes. Significantly lower. We are talking about a difference of nearly 4 big blinds per 100 hands. In poker terms, that is massive. That is not a rounding error. That is not variance. That is the difference between making a solid side income and barely covering the rake that the house takes from every pot. That is the difference between moving up stakes confidently and grinding in place, wondering why your results feel so flat despite playing what everyone tells you is the correct strategy. And this raises an obvious question that cuts directly to the heart of the entire GTO debate that has dominated poker education for the past decade. If GTO is supposed to be optimal, why did I make less money playing it perfectly than I make playing exploitative poker imperfectly with all my human biases and mistakes and missed spots? The answer reveals something crucial that most poker education gets completely wrong about why we study game theory in the first place. GTO is not designed to maximize profit. Read that again because it contradicts almost everything you hear in poker strategy content from coaches and training sites. GTO is designed to be unexploitable. Those are fundamentally different objectives that produce fundamentally different outcomes at the tables. And if you confuse them, you will build a strategy that protects you from opponents who do not exist while leaving money on the table against opponents who are practically begging to be exploited. Upswing poker. Published research confirming exactly this finding that my experiment demonstrated in real hands with real money. A GTO-based style will not always make the most profitable play. By definition, a GTO approach does not factor in your opponent's tendencies, including the exploitable ones. In other words, pure GTO strategy systematically passes up on the most plus expected value decision for the sake of balance. This hurts the expected value of many individual hands, but theoretically makes your overall range more profitable against perfect opponents playing perfect strategy. But here is the thing. Here is the insight that changed everything for me during those 10,000 hands. Your opponents are not perfect. Not even close. Not even the best players at your stakes. Let me show you exactly what happened during the experiment, because the patterns were genuinely eye-opening for someone who spent months preparing to play theoretically perfect poker. In the first 1,000 hands, I ran slightly below expectation, but felt completely in control. My decisions were clean. My frequencies were balanced. I knew I was playing correctly even when I lost pots because I could verify every single decision against solver outputs afterward. There was a strange psychological peace in that certainty. No second guessing. No wondering if I should have played differently. No lying awake at night replaying hands. It was the math. But something else started happening around hand 2000 that I did not anticipate at all. I was leaving money on the table in spots that were obvious even in real time while I was playing them. I could see the expected value evaporating, and I had to watch it happen because I committed to the experiment. There was a player at my table who folded to continuation bets over 80% of the time. 80%. That is not a tendency. That is a leak so massive you could drive a truck through it. GTO says I should be continuation betting around 60% of flops with a carefully balanced range of value hands and bluffs mixed at specific frequencies. But against this specific opponent with this specific leak, I should be betting nearly 100% of flops because he folds so much that even my worst garbage hands show immediate profit by putting chips in the middle and watching him fold. I knew this. I could see it in his stats. I understood the math completely. But I had committed to pure GTO for the experiment. So I checked back hands I should have bet. I gave up on pots I should have taken down. I played balanced ranges against a player who was anything but balanced. And I watched equity evaporate hand after hand after session because the solver does not know that this specific human folds too much to see bets. The solver assumes your opponent plays perfectly and responds accordingly. But here is the brutal truth that 10,000 hands made undeniably clear. No one at the poker table plays perfectly. Not your opponents. Not the regulars who study and review their hands. Not even the strongest, most feared players in your games who seem to have everything figured out. Everyone has patterns. Everyone has tendencies. Everyone deviates from equilibrium in predictable, exploitable ways. And pure GTO ignores all of it by design, because it was never designed to maximize profit against imperfect opponents. By hand 5000, the pattern was unmistakable and the data was clear. I was winning against the strong regulars. My balanced ranges and theoretically sound play gave them nothing to exploit. They could not figure out my frequencies because my frequencies were mathematically optimal. They could not adjust to my tendencies because I had no tendencies to adjust to. Against tough, competent opponents, GTO was performing exactly as advertised. Unexploitable, solid, consistent, reliable. But I was barely breaking even against the recreational players. The fish, the weak players who should have been my primary source of profit at these stakes, were not paying me off the way they usually do when I play my normal exploitative game. And here is exactly why that happened. Recreational players make massive fundamental errors constantly. They call too much with weak hands. They fold too much in certain spots when they should be defending. They bet when they should check for pot control. They check when they should bet for value. They overvalue weak pairs and undervalue strong draws. They are talking exploitability machines, generating expected value for anyone paying even basic attention to their patterns. But GTO does not pay attention. GTO assumes they play optimally and responds with balanced ranges accordingly. The research confirms this across multiple credible sources. This is not about choosing GTO over exploitation or exploitation over GTO. That is a false choice that keeps players stuck arguing about the wrong question entirely. This is about architecture, building a system where GTO provides your defensive foundation and exploitation provides your profit engine, where theoretical knowledge informs your baseline strategy and adaptive skills drive your actual monetary results against real opponents. That is exactly what the Mind of a Grinder Collection 2 teaches completely. Not another GTO course teaching solver outputs you will forget under pressure. Not another exploitative guide with reads you cannot implement in real-time situations. A complete operating system showing how to integrate both approaches into one unified framework that actually works at the tables. 10 ebooks covering the full architecture systematically. How to build your GTO foundation so strong opponents cannot exploit you. How to identify opponent patterns in real time without overthinking. How to know when deviation from equilibrium is profitable and when it is a trap. How to execute adaptive strategy under pressure when emotions want you to default. Plus, 5 premium bonuses including the Decision Framework Protocol. $29.89. Launch price only. The link is in the pinned comment below this video. Click it now, then come back. Because what I discovered in the final 5,000 hands completely reframes everything. Welcome back. The final 5,000 hands of the experiment revealed something I genuinely did not expect. something that forced me to completely reconsider my conclusions about GTO poker and what it actually provides to players who study it seriously. Around hand 8,000, I noticed a pattern in my own psychology that was invisible, until I had enough data to see it clearly in my tracking. I was more confident in my decisions than I had ever been playing exploitative poker. That sounds like a small thing, an irrelevant psychological footnote. But the implications for your actual results are massive, and most players completely miss this. When you play exploitative poker, you are constantly making judgment calls based on incomplete information. Is this player actually folding too much, or did I just see a small, unrepresentative sample? Is this tendency real, or am I pattern matching on statistical noise? Should I deviate from balanced play here, or is my read completely wrong? Every decision carries doubt. Every adjustment could be a mistake. And that doubt has a cost that does not show up in your win rate directly, but destroys your results indirectly through second-guessing and hesitation and tilt. When your confident reads turn out to be embarrassingly wrong, GTO eliminates that doubt entirely. Is the math. The solver says, this is the correct play, so this is the correct play. Win or lose, the decision was right, and you know it with certainty. And that psychological clarity had an effect I did not anticipate when I started. My tilt decreased dramatically across the entire sample. My decision fatigue reduced significantly, even in long sessions. My ability to play extended hours without deterioration improved measurably compared to my baseline. I was making less money per hand on average, but I was playing more hands at higher quality for longer periods with less emotional damage accumulating. So here is the real conclusion from 10,000 hands of pure GTO poker. It is not what the GTO advocates claim. It is not what the exploitative purists claim either. It is something more nuanced and more useful than either extreme position allows. GTO is the foundation, not the ceiling, not the complete strategy, not the final answer. The foundation. It gives you a baseline that cannot be exploited by even the strongest opponents. It gives you confidence in your decisions regardless of short-term outcomes. It gives you psychological stability when variance destroys your results temporarily and you need something solid to hold on to. It gives you a framework for understanding why certain plays are correct, even when they lose money in specific instances against specific opponents. But GTO alone will never maximize your profit against real opponents in real games where real money is on the line. The data from 10,000 hands proves this conclusively beyond any reasonable argument. 4 big blinds per 100 left on the table by refusing to exploit obvious patterns. 30% of hands containing spots where adaptation would generate significantly more expected value than balance. Recreational players paying me less because I treated them like solvers instead of like the predictable mistake machines they actually are in reality. The strongest players in the modern game understand this integration intuitively. They use GTO as their defensive core so they cannot be exploited. They exploit relentlessly whenever they identify reliable patterns in opponent behavior. They know exactly when to deviate from equilibrium and when to stay balanced, based on specific criteria, not random feelings. They have built an architecture that combines both approaches into something more powerful than either approach could ever be alone. Sure, let me give you the 3 biggest practical lessons from 10,000 hands so you can start applying this immediately without running your own expensive experiment. Lesson 1. Learn GTO deeply before you try to exploit anyone. This sounds backwards to most players, but the data supports it completely. If you do not understand what balanced play looks like, you cannot recognize when opponents deviate from it. If you do not know the solver-approved frequencies for common spots, you cannot identify when someone is betting too much or folding too often or calling too wide in ways you can exploit. GTO knowledge is the lens through which exploitative opportunities become visible. Without that lens, you are just guessing and hoping. And guessing is not a strategy that produces long-term profit. Lesson 2. Track patterns systematically, not just results randomly. During the experiment, I flagged over 3,000 hands, where exploitation would have been significantly more profitable than the GTO line. I only knew this because I was tracking opponent tendencies methodically, not just looking at whether I won or lost each session. Your HUD data, your session notes, your population reads, these are the tools that transform theoretical GTO knowledge into exploitative profit in actual games. Without systematic tracking, you are playing blind against opponents who have patterns you cannot see. Lesson 3. Build decision frameworks, not memorized plays. The integration of GTO and exploitative poker is not about memorizing specific situations where you should deviate. It is about building mental frameworks that tell you what information to gather, what thresholds trigger deviation from equilibrium, and how to size your adjustments based on confidence level in your reads. These frameworks let you make adaptive decisions in real time without analysis, paralysis, without crippling second-guessing, without the cognitive overload that destroys execution under pressure. Here is what 10,000 hands taught me about the future of poker strategy and where you should focus your development from this point forward. The game is evolving beyond the false choice between GTO and exploitative. The players who will dominate the next decade are not the ones who pick a side and defend it religiously. They are the ones who build integrated systems that leverage both approaches situationally based on context and opponent type. Against tough opponents who study and adapt quickly, GTO provides the defensive stability that prevents them from exploiting your patterns. Against recreational players who make predictable errors, constantly exploitation extracts maximum value from mistakes they do not even know they are making. Against unknown opponents, GTO gives you a profitable baseline while you gather information to inform exploitative adjustments later in the session. This is not about being balanced or being adaptive. It is about being both, knowing when to be which. Having the frameworks to execute the right approach in the right moment without conscious deliberation slowing you down. That is the architecture that produces sustained long-term profit at any stake level against any opponent pool in any game type. And that is exactly what the Mind of a Grinder Collection 2 teaches systematically through 10 comprehensive ebooks, plus 5 premium bonuses designed specifically for players who want to stop choosing sides and start integrating approaches. $29.89. Launch price for a few days only. The link is in the pinned comment. The experiment cost me 4 big blinds per 100 over 10,000 hands to generate these insights. You can get them for less than the rake on a single session. Click it. Build the architecture. Stop leaving money on the table by committing to incomplete approaches that were never designed to be used alone. If this video changed how you think about GTO and exploitation, hit like and subscribe for more. Share it with one player who is stuck in the debate. They do not have to choose, and neither do you. See you in the next one.